My wife left me outside her company Gala, so I quietly canceled $62,000, and then 36 missed calls began. They looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sorry, you're not invited. Leave." And when I did not move fast enough, when I just stood there trying to understand what I had heard, a man in a black blazer placed his hand against my chest and said, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to exit the building." That man was hotel security. And I was standing in the lobby of the Fontainebleau Miami Beach, one of the most iconic hotels in the country, wearing a $1,400 suit, holding a card that said spouse on the guest list, trying to get into a dinner I had personally helped fund. My name is Spencer Caldwell. I'm 45 years old. I own an event production company here in Miami, Florida called Caldwell Creative Group. For the past 16 years, I've built stages, designed lighting rigs, coordinated vendors, solved last-minute disasters, and moved mountains so other people's events could look effortless and flawless. I know this industry from the inside out. My wife Renata works as a senior vice president at a hospitality consulting firm called Hargrove and Lane. That night, a Thursday in late October, was their company's 15-year anniversary gala. 400 guests, catering by a Michelin-starred team. Open bar, live band, the whole thing. And I was standing on the wrong side of a velvet rope while a security guard waited for me to leave. I am going to tell you exactly what happened, every detail. And then I am going to tell you what I did next. Quietly, systematically, without raising my voice once. What followed led to 36 missed calls, a canceled vacation, a ruined birthday party, and a visit to my front door from someone I never expected to see. But before I get into all of that, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. These stories are long for a reason. Every detail matters. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done standing in that lobby. And like the video if you have ever been made to feel invisible by someone who was supposed to have your back. Let's get into it. You need to understand who Renata and I were before that night, because context is everything. We met 11 years ago at a product launch event I was producing at the Perez Art Museum in Wynwood. She was there representing a client. I was running the show. We bumped into each other near the catering station. Literally bumped. She spilled champagne on my sleeve, and the way she apologized caught me completely off guard. It was genuine, specific, and full of this sharp little humor that somehow cut through the stress of the night. I laughed for the first time that entire evening. We dated for 2 years. Then we got married in a small ceremony in Coral Gables with 40 people and a caterer I knew personally. We bought a house in Coconut Grove, 3 bedrooms, a pool, and the kind of mature oak trees in the backyard that take decades to grow. We built something real. And I want to say this clearly, even now, even after everything, Renata is brilliant. She is one of the sharpest strategic minds I have ever met. She can walk into a room, read every dynamic in it within 5 minutes, and position herself perfectly. That quality made her extraordinary at her job. She went from mid-level consultant to senior vice president in 6 years. The people at Hargrove and Lane loved her. She was the person they called when a client relationship was in crisis. She fixed things. She made problems disappear. What I did not fully understand for a long time was that somewhere along the way, some of those problems became me. Let me explain. About 3 years into her time at Hargrove and Lane, the culture shifted. The firm brought in a new managing director, a woman named Adrienne Okafor, who had very specific ideas about how leadership should present itself. Polished, unified, carefully curated. The right image at all times. Adrienne came from a world where your spouse, your home, your social circle, your wardrobe, your weekend plans, all of it became part of your professional brand. Renata bought into it completely. At first, the changes were gradual. She started correcting me in front of her colleagues. Small things. The way I pronounced a name, a joke she thought landed wrong, an opinion I offered that she had not pre-approved. At first I told myself it was nothing. Everybody gets tense at work events. Everybody wants to look good in front of senior leadership. Then she started declining to mention my company at work events because, as she explained once very carefully, event production sounds blue-collar to people who don't understand it. I let it go. I told myself she was under pressure. I told myself she was building something important and I could be patient. What I did not realize was that patience has a cost, and I had been paying that cost for years without ever stopping to look at the bill. The 15-year anniversary gala for Hargrove and Lane had been in planning for 8 months. I knew about it because Renata talked about it constantly. The venue, the guest count, the catering negotiations, the table arrangements, the board members who needed to be seated near each other, the clients who could not be seated near each other. She was on the planning committee, so the gala followed her home long before the actual night arrived. About 4 months before the event, something interesting happened in my professional life. The Fontainebleau Miami Beach, the same venue Hargrove and Lane had booked for the gala, reached out to me directly. They were restructuring their in-house event production contracts and they wanted Caldwell Creative Group to come in and assess their AV setup. We ended up signing a 6-month consulting agreement. So I was literally in that building on a professional basis multiple times before the night of the gala. I mentioned this to Renata. She did not say much. A tight smile, a subject change. That was it. 2 months before the event, she brought up the gala in a different way. She was standing in our kitchen in Coconut Grove, phone in hand, and said very casually, "The gala has a +1 policy for the senior leadership team. I've been going back and forth on whether to bring you." I remember setting down my coffee. "Going back and forth," I repeated. "It's a work event, Spencer. The dynamics are complicated." "Renata, I'm your husband. I know that." She looked at me evenly. "I just want to make sure you understand the environment. It's very polished, very specific. Adrian will be there. The board will be there. I need to be focused, and I'm a distraction." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." We tabled the conversation. Eventually, she told me she had put me on the guest list. She told me the dress code was black tie. She told me the start time was 7 p.m. She told me to meet her there because she needed to arrive early for setup obligations. She said it would be good for us to go together. She said she was looking forward to it. And I believed her. I spent $1,400 on a suit from a tailor on Miracle Mile. I got a haircut. I bought her flowers, calla lilies her favorite, planning to hand them to her when I arrived. I also made a dinner reservation for the two of us at Stubborn Seed the following Saturday, just to celebrate her. She had been working so hard, and I wanted her to know I was proud of her. So that Thursday evening in late October, I drove to the Fontainebleau. I valeted my car. I walked through the lobby in a suit that fit perfectly, carrying calla lilies, and gave my name at the check-in table. The woman at the table was a young professional and holding a clipboard. She looked through the list once, then again. Then she looked up at me. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't see a Spencer Caldwell on the list." I stayed calm. I assumed it was an administrative error. "Could you check under my wife's name, Renata Caldwell? She's on the leadership team." The woman checked again. "I see Renata Caldwell listed as senior staff. There's no +1 attached to her reservation." "That's not right. She told me there was." "Can someone reach her?" I asked. "She's probably inside." The woman looked uncomfortable. She excused herself, made a quiet phone call, and came back about 2 minutes later. "Mr. Caldwell, I've been informed that the guest list is final. I'm sorry." "Informed by whom?" I almost asked. But before I could, a man in a black blazer materialized at my elbow. Hotel security. His name badge said Derek. He was polite, professionally trained, and completely impersonal. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back from the check-in area." I looked at Derek. I looked at the woman with the clipboard. I looked at the lobby of the Fontainebleau, the marble floors, the chandelier, the crowd of people in formal wear, moving past me toward a party I had been told I was attending. "I work with this hotel," I said very quietly. "I have a consulting contract here." "I understand," Derek said. "But if you're not on the event guest list, I can't let you through." That was when I heard a voice behind me. "Spencer!" I turned around. It was Renata. She had come out of the event. She was wearing a floor-length emerald gown I had never seen before. Her hair was done. Her makeup was perfect. She looked beautiful. And she looked absolutely horrified. But not horrified that this was happening to me. Horrified that I was still standing there. "Renata," I said, "what is going on?" She stepped toward me, lowering her voice. "I tried to call you this afternoon. You didn't call me." "Spencer, this isn't a good time." You told me I was on the list. Her jaw tightened. She glanced over her shoulder and I followed her gaze. About 20 feet away, just inside the entrance to the event space, a woman was watching us. 50s, impeccably dressed, completely expressionless. Adrienne Okafor, the managing director, watching. Renata turned back to me. Her voice dropped even further. I'm sorry. The decision was made above me. You can't be here tonight. Made above you, I repeated. There were concerns about... She stopped. Then she started again. There were concerns about optics. Optics, I stood there for a moment. I looked at her face. I looked at the flowers in my hand, the calla lilies I had bought for her, and I felt something very specific happen inside me. Not an explosion, not a breakdown, something quieter than that, something permanent. I set the flowers on the check-in table. Okay, I said. Then I turned around and walked out. I had my car brought around by valet. I drove home to Coconut Grove. I sat in my driveway for about 15 minutes. I want to be honest about what I felt in those 15 minutes because I think it matters. It was not rage. It was grief. But it was a very clear-eyed kind of grief, the kind that arrives when something you had already half suspected finally becomes confirmed. The kind that hits when the thing you kept telling yourself was not true turns out to be exactly as true as you feared. Renata was ashamed of me. Not occasionally, not in private moments of frustration, fundamentally, structurally, as a policy. She had removed me from a guest list I was entitled to be on because having her husband present in a room full of the people whose opinions mattered most to her was a liability. Not a risk, a liability. That word kept running through my head as I sat in the driveway. Liability. I went inside. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon. I sat down at my home office desk, the one in the room I had converted from the guest bedroom because I work from home 3 days a week. Then I opened my laptop. I was not going to scream. I was not going to call her and give her the satisfaction of hearing me fall apart. I was not going to involve her family or mine. Not yet. I was going to do what I knew how to do. I was going to assess the situation. I was going to identify the leverage points, and I was going to make decisions. This is what owning a business teaches you. Emotion is information, not instruction. You feel it, you note it, then you get to work. I opened our shared financial accounts. Renata and I had a joint account we used for household expenses and shared commitments, vacations, home repairs, shared subscriptions, things that were supposed to belong to both of us. I also had my business accounts, obviously, and those were entirely separate. But the joint account held significant shared commitments, and I had total access to it. I pulled up a list of every automatic payment, recurring charge, and scheduled expenditure attached to that account. Then I started reading, and I started making decisions. Here is what I found, and here is what I did. First, Renata's birthday party. She was turning 42 in 6 weeks. At her request, her enthusiastic, specific, detailed request, I had booked a private dining room at Ariete in Coconut Grove. 14 guest, set menu, open wine tab. The deposit was already paid. The full bill payable on the day of the event was going to run approximately $4,800. I called Ariete the next morning and canceled the reservation. I was polite. I explained there had been a change in plans. They returned my deposit within a week. Second, a trip to the Amalfi Coast. Renata and I had been planning that trip for almost 2 years. Flights, hotels, a private boat excursion out of Positano, the whole thing. I had booked it, I had coordinated all of it because she had once said, and I remember this word for word, "You're so much better at this than I am. You make everything perfect." The total cost of the trip was just under $22,000. I had paid for it entirely out of our joint account. I contacted the travel agency we used, a firm in Brickell I had worked with for years, and I initiated the cancellation process. Because I had booked through them on a flexible rate and purchased travel insurance, I recovered approximately $17,400. The rest was non-refundable. That stung, but it was a cost I was prepared to absorb. Third, a home renovation project we had contracted. We were redoing the primary bathroom, New tile, new fixtures, custom cabinetry. The contractor, a guy named Troy, was someone I had used twice before. He was scheduled to start in 3 weeks. The contract value was $31,000. We had already paid a deposit of $9,000. I called Troy, explained that we were pausing the project indefinitely, and asked him to hold the deposit as credit against future work. Troy knew me. He knew I had always treated him fairly. He also knew I would send more business his way, so he agreed. Fourth, a series of smaller things. A subscription to a high-end meal delivery service, Renata used $380 a month. Tickets to a charity gala she had mentioned wanting to attend in December, $1,200 for 2. A hotel reservation in the Keys for New Year's Eve, $2,600. A personal training package she had started and charged to the joint account, $3,400. Canceled, 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 canceled. The total value of commitments I either canceled, paused, or redirected came to approximately $62,000. I want to be clear about something. I did not do this in anger. I did not do this because I wanted to be childish or petty or vindictive. I did it because I needed to understand clearly and in numbers exactly how much of what we called our shared life I was actually financing. And once I did that math, I needed those resources to reflect reality, not the arrangement I had been pretending we had, not the marriage I had been hoping still existed. Reality. The reality was that the arrangement was fundamentally broken. I also contacted my attorney, not to file anything, not yet, just to have a consultation, just to understand where I stood. Then I turned off my phone. I made dinner, I watched an old film I had been meaning to see for months, and I went to sleep. My phone stayed off overnight. I turned it back on at 6:30 in the morning while I was making coffee. 36 missed calls, 14 text messages, 3 voicemails. Renata had called 8 times between 11 p.m. and midnight. Apparently, when she got home from the gala and realized I was not there. Then she called 6 more times between 7 and 8 in the morning, when the cancellation notifications presumably started reaching her. The travel agency would have sent an email confirmation. The restaurant would have too. The text ranged from "Spencer, where are you? I'm worried," to "What did you do?" to "Call me right now. This is insane." I read all of them. I did not respond to any of them. There were also 3 calls from a number I did not recognize, a 305 area code, Miami, but not a contact in my phone. I ignored those too. I went to the gym. I had a training session at a facility in South Miami where I had been going for 4 years. I told my trainer I had had a rough week and needed to work hard. So we worked hard. I drove home. I showered. I answered 2 work emails that needed responses. Then at 11:45 a.m., my doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera feed on my phone. On my front porch in Coconut Grove, standing in the kind of late October Miami morning that is warm and golden and somehow completely inappropriate for everything that was happening, was a woman I did not expect. It was not Renata. It was Claudia Brennan. Claudia was the events director at Hargrove and Lane. She had been on the planning committee with Renata. And as I would later understand, she was the one who had made the call about the guest list. I opened the door. Claudia Brennan was in her mid-40s, trim and professional, the kind of put-together that suggested she had a schedule and stuck to it. She was not wearing work clothes. She had clearly come to my house on her own time, in jeans and a blazer, which told me something before she even spoke. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "I'm Claudia Brennan. I work with Renata." "I know who you are," I said. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "May I come in?" I thought about it for a moment, then I stepped back and let her in. We sat in the living room. I did not offer coffee. I waited. Claudia said, "I want to be honest with you because I think you deserve that. What happened last night was my decision, not Adrian's, not Renata's." I looked at her. "Explain that." She took a breath. "Adrian made a comment 2 weeks ago about how the event should feel. Very curated, very leadership-focused. And I interpreted that as a directive to keep it tight. Renata had already submitted your name as her +1. I removed it. The silence in the room changed. You removed my name from the guest list." "Yes." "Without telling my wife." "Yes." And when Renata came to the lobby and told me I wasn't on the list, she didn't know why either. Claudia closed her eyes briefly. I don't know exactly what she knew in that moment. I've been trying to reach her this morning too. What I do know is that the security interaction asking you to leave the way it was handled was completely unacceptable. You are her husband, you were a guest, and you've worked with the Fontainebleau professionally. I'm embarrassed by how that went. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then I looked back at her. Claudia, I appreciate you coming here. I genuinely do. It takes something to show up at someone's door and say what you just said. But she said, but I need you to understand something. Whether it was your call or Adrian's or Renata's, the outcome is the same. I stood in the lobby of a hotel where I have a professional contract and I was told to leave by security. That is the outcome. The origin story does not change the outcome. She nodded. And the issue I'm dealing with, I continued, is not just about one night. You can see that, right? One night is a symptom. What happened last night was the clearest possible expression of a dynamic I've been watching build for 3 years. Claudia did not say anything for a moment. Then she asked, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm in the middle of figuring that out." She stood up. She reached into her bag and handed me a card. "I'm going to address this with Adrian and with our HR team. Regardless of everything else, your professional standing, your contract with the venue, you were treated poorly, and that needs to be acknowledged formally." I took the card. I walked her to the door. After she left, I stood in my living room for a long time. Renata arrived at the house at 1 p.m. She had a key. She walked in and found me in the kitchen. She looked like she had not slept. The evening makeup was gone. She was wearing clothes she had clearly pulled on in a hurry. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something that was trying to be anger, but kept collapsing into something far less controlled than anger. "You canceled the Amalfi trip," she said. "I did." "You canceled my birthday dinner." "I did." "Spencer." Her voice cracked on my name. "Why?" I set down the glass I was holding. Then I turned to face her fully. "Because I sat in our driveway last night for 15 minutes, I said. And I tried to think of a single major commitment in our shared life that you had initiated, planned, and paid for. And I couldn't think of one." She said nothing. "And then I started thinking about how long I've been watching you edit me out of your life in little ways. I tried to remember the last time you defended me to someone. The last time you said something about what I do that wasn't a quiet apology for my existence. And I realized I had been funding a life that I was not fully welcome in." The kitchen was very still. "So I thought, if that is the arrangement, then I should stop funding the parts that benefit you and see what is left." "That's not fair," she said. "The Fontainebleau lobby was not fair," I said. "I didn't know Claudia had taken you off the list." "Renata." I stopped her there. "You've been taking me off lists for 3 years. Claudia just did it literally." She flinched. "I am not going to pretend I said that a single apology from Claudia or a single conversation with HR is going to fix what is actually wrong here. What is actually wrong here is that somewhere in the last 3 years, you made a decision about who I am and what I am worth, and then you started making choices based on that decision without telling me." She looked down. "And I let you," I continued, "because I loved you, because I trusted you, because I wanted to believe that what I was seeing was not really what I was seeing." "I love you," she said. I know you do," I said, "in your way." She went quiet. "But love that is conditional on other people not seeing it is not the kind I can live on." She sat down at the kitchen table. Then she put her face in her hands. We sat there for a long time. I am not going to tell you this story had a clean ending because it did not. Life does not usually give you clean endings. What I can tell you is what happened over the following 2 months, because it matters. Claudia Brennan followed through. She filed a formal incident report with Hargrove and Lane's HR department documenting what had happened at the gala. Adrian Okafor, when called in to respond, was apparently furious. Not at Claudia, at the fact that the situation had become a documented incident. In trying to build an image of seamless, curated professionalism, they had created a liability far larger than any awkward spouse at a party ever could have been. I received a formal written apology from the firm. The Fontainebleau separately reached out through their events team. The security manager personally called me. They were concerned about the incident, especially given my consulting relationship with the property. They offered, and I accepted, an upgraded contract renewal. The security manager for the record was mortified. Derek, the guard who had escorted me out, was also mortified when he found out who I was. I held no grudge against Derek. He was doing his job with the information he had. Renata and I began couples therapy 3 weeks after the gala. I want to be honest and say I was not optimistic going in. I went because I believed I owed both of us the attempt to understand what had happened before making any permanent decisions. What came out in those sessions was more complicated than I expected. Renata's internalization of Adrian's expectations had gone deeper than I had understood. She had not consciously decided to be ashamed of me. Instead, she had been slowly and methodically conditioned to see me as a professional liability, and she had begun making decisions from that place without fully examining them. That does not excuse it, but it does explain it. We are still in therapy. I do not know where we will land. I am not going to tell you we fixed everything in 60 days, because that would be a lie, and you deserve better than a lie. The birthday dinner did not happen at Ariete. We spent her birthday quietly at home, eating food I cooked. She said it was the best birthday she had had in years. I believed her. The Amalfi Coast trip is still on the table. It has been rescheduled, not canceled, for next spring. I rebooked it under terms that I felt reflected the relationship I needed us to have. An equal partnership, not a favor I was extending. The bathroom renovation resumed. Troy started work 2 weeks ago. Renata chose the tile herself. She came home and showed me the samples with a kind of careful, deliberate enthusiasm that I recognized as her trying to include me in something instead of manage me around it. It was a small thing. I noted it. I am 45 years old. I have spent my professional life making other people's events look effortless. I understand logistics. I understand contingency planning. I understand what it costs to build something that looks beautiful and seamless from the outside. What I have been slower to understand is that some of those skills made me too easy to take for granted. I plan, I accommodate, I solve problems before they become visible. I have been doing that in my marriage the same way I do it at work. And I had not fully noticed that Renata had started treating the outcome as natural rather than cultivated, as something she deserved rather than something I was choosing to build. Standing in that lobby in a $1,400 suit, holding flowers, being escorted out by security was my contingency plan finally arriving. It was the emergency I had been quietly planning around for years, finally refusing to stay invisible. I am glad I did not yell. I am glad I walked out quietly. I am glad I went home, sat down, and thought. Because what I did next, calmly, methodically, without drama, was the first time in 3 years that I made decisions based entirely on what I needed, rather than what would keep the peace. 36 missed calls told me something important. I was not as invisible as I had been trained to believe. The question now is whether the person on the other end of those calls is capable of seeing me clearly. Not when it costs her nothing, but when it costs her something. I'll let you know.